Okay. Hello everyone and welcome to the James Gillespie's High School Parent Council meeting. I'm Sarah Scott, I'm Chair of the Parent Council. Thank you all for joining us this evening. To start, I have to say I have a little bit of a cold, so I apologise for any sneezing that might go on. I'll try to do that off camera if possible, and also if I don't sound as clear as I might. Can I make the usual apologies for any technical issues we might have during the meeting? For example, if you're having problems joining us or hearing us, and if one of the presenters' Wi-Fi freezes, we ask for your patience. We're using MS Teams for the meeting because it's a system approved by the Council, but it is not as interactive as some systems, and the only people who can be heard are the presenters. Everyone else attending can write questions via the Q&A panel but can't be heard. The meeting is being recorded, and as with previous meetings in this format, it will be put online for those who can't make it this evening, or if you need to leave at any point, or if you want to rewatch any part of it. That being the case, please don't share any personal information that shouldn't be aired publicly. We normally aim for meetings to last about an hour, though we sometimes overrun that a bit. As I mentioned, we can only take questions via the Q&A panel. The questions will be published for everyone to see by our parent moderators this evening, so if you'd like your question to stay private, please see so when you type it in. And if you see a question on the Q&A that is similar to one that you would like to ask, could you like that question rather than ask a repeat? That will be very helpful in making sure that we can manage the questions as efficiently as possible. Finally, can I also ask that all questions or comments are expressed in an appropriately courteous way? All the questions will be gathered up at the end and posted together with answers on the Parent Council website. We do have a Q&A for the last meeting, which I'm aware hasn't been posted yet, but will be later this week, though happily we did manage to deal with all the questions during the meeting itself, so those are all recovered in the recording. If you have any urgent issues or queries, please don't wait for the Q&A to be published, but get in touch directly with the school or with the Parent Council. So tonight the meeting will run like this. Firstly, I will give an update on Parent Council activities. That will be followed by a presentation from Nikki Graham, who is new in post as Mental Health Coordinator for the school, although she was with us before that as Pupil Support Leader. She'll be talking about her new role and supporting mental health at the school. We will then deal with questions on Nikki's presentation straight afterwards rather than at the end of the meeting. So if you have any points or queries for her, please raise them at that point. And after that, our head teacher, Donald MacDonald, will give his normal report on school's activities. And then we will have the general Q&A for issues which Donald will deal with. So starting with Parent Council work. The Parent Council ran a survey at the end of March and over the Easter period on parents' evenings and other events involving parents, but with a focus on preferences for whether parents' evenings should be run online or in person or a mixture of those approaches. Once we are back to a situation of normal access to the school. Thank you to everyone who contributed to that survey. We were very pleased to have over 160 responses. We have collated that information and will post it on the Parent Council website later this week. However, the top line result is that there is a broadly even split between those who want to stay online, those wanting to meet in person, and those who want a mix of approaches. So we've passed that on to the school to feed into their planning for next year, and they can work out what to do with that information. One other thing I mentioned at the last PC meeting was the plan to have a quick questionnaire to gauge the popularity of suggestions that have been made for different kinds of events that might be held in the future, and also, and importantly, to find out whether we can get the numbers of people involved that would be required to organise and run events. So this is still to come out, so keep a lookout for the questionnaire, and please also consider whether you would be able to help with events in the future. That won't necessarily mean a general commitment to being involved. It could be for a single occasion, but without volunteers, we won't be able to get anything up and running. I would normally report at this point on meetings with council reps. However, as you will all be aware, there were council elections on 5th May, and there are now new councillors in place for the period until 2027. This has meant that the normal cycle of meetings has not been operating, so I have nothing specific to report on there. Many of the councillors who were previously on the Education, Children and Families Committee, who we had most dealings with, have now retired from the council, and that includes the convener and the vice convener. This does mean a loss of understanding from the committee of the issues that schools have been facing, particularly over the last 2 years. However, once a new education committee is in place, we will be looking to make relationships with the new councillors and work with them in the future. Turning now to Parent Council finances, on behalf of the Parent Council Treasurer, Ros Ingle, I'd like to let you know the following. The PC bank account is still in the same position as it was at the last meeting, with a balance of £1,635.88. We have opened applications for the Small Sums Fund for the youth school year 2022-23. This is earlier than we normally do, and the intention is that staff have the chance now to consider how much to apply for while they are planning for the next school year. The applications will not be reviewed nor the funds allocated until the closing balance of the current school year's fundraising is known after the 31st of July. However, we aim to get funds to the staff concerned as soon as possible after the beginning of the school year. The James Gillespie Trust has also indicated that they are willing to be involved in supporting the process again this year through funding some of the applications, which is excellent news as it widens the amount of support available. Every year we get very positive feedback from teaching staff about how useful these awards are in supporting their work. It is the generosity of parents that allows us to make this support available to the school, so if you are able and you're in parent pay to deal with something else, please consider making a donation to the Parent Council Fund. Alternatively, you can support that work at no cost to yourself through easy fundraising, which makes a donation to your chosen fund when you shop online. We are hopeful that next year our main fundraising activities, refreshments at school events will be possible again. I think I've been saying that for about a year now. In the meantime, we hope that parents can continue to support our work supporting the school, as you have so generously done over the last 2 years. You can find further information on all of this on the Parent Council website under fundraising. Just to remind you, the website is at jghsparentcouncil.org, and you can also get to our website via the Parents tab in the School Zone website. This is the last Parent Council meeting of the 2021-22 school year, so I would like to take the advantage of having the floor to say a few goodbyes. Firstly, I would like to say goodbye and thank you to the Parent Council members whose youngest children are leaving S6 and so won't be with us on the Parent Council next year. These are Kath Downey, a former chair of the Parent Council, Anna Crystal, who was secretary of the Parent Council until last year, Graham Davis, who was our comms rep and a supporter of all things technical, and Karen Burke, a long-standing member who has right up to the end been supporting the Parent Council as the parent rep on deputy head teacher interview panels. I hope they will miss us when they go. I know that we will miss them, as they have been amazing at supporting the Parent Council to get through all the things that they've had to get through over the pandemic period, as well as all their sterling work in the years before that, and for some of them that is quite a lot of years. They are great people to work with. I will miss them, and we wish them all the best for the future. Also on the subject of goodbyes, I'm sure it will not have escaped your notice that our head teacher Donald MacDonald has very recently announced his retirement and will be leaving us in the summer. This is a big moment for the school, as Donald has been at Gillespie's for a long time. I think I'm correct in saying it since 2012, and he came from Liberton High School, where he was head teacher before that. He has thus been head of the school all the way through a period of decant and rebuild of a new school, and through a period of rising roles and on to expansion of the school to a building, the Darach building, which we were originally decanted to. The school he bequeaths to successor is thus substantially larger, both in terms of pupil numbers and square footage, than the one which he arrived at. Of course, he has also been the head teacher, has been in charge over the pandemic and all the challenges that that has posed. All that, over all of that period, I think it's fair to say Donald has been a figure of stability and certainty for the school community. Donald is a proud Gael, a Gaelic speaker from Lochmaddy in North Uist. I was terribly tempted to say he was from Lewis just to see what he said, but he's a Uist man. And I know he has also particularly enjoyed being the head of the only GME secondary school in Edinburgh. It is difficult to know exactly what to say which can adequately capture Donald's input over this period and his care for the school and the community here. He has seen many hundreds of Gillespie's kids through their whole schooling and out into the world. He is a great advocate of parental representation at Gillespie's and is a core part of the education system. And speaking personally, he was a great support and has been a great support to me as a chair of Parent Council starting in post during the pandemic, for which I will remain eternally grateful. Everybody will have their own memories, and the Parent Council is considering the best way for us to mark his departure. watch this space. And in the meantime, the Parent Council, on behalf of parents, thanks Donald for his service to the school and its community over all these years, and we wish him and his family all the very best in his retirement. Donald's post has recently been advertised with the intention of getting someone in position as close as possible to his departure date. The Parent Council is involved in that process with 2 parents on the interviewing panel, and we will endeavour to represent you as well as we can in that process. So that's everything for me just now. Thank you for listening. I will now pass on to Nikki to talk to us about mental health support at the school. Thank you.
Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for having me on here. I'm just going to check that I can put this on for you. Okay, so that is that. Yeah. Is that okay? Can you see that all right now? Okay, so I'm just going to talk. I actually presented a very similar presentation to our staff at our recent inset. So I've adapted this slightly for the parents. Basically, I'm just going to give you a little bit of information, first of all, on, you know, there may be varying levels of knowledge, and I'm sure many of you know quite a lot about mental health, but I'll just go through the slides with you the way I did with the staff. So we do sort of feel that there's a real need to go back to basics with mental health, and we were saying this to staff as well, that we've all got mental health and that it's shifting on a continuum, and our mental health and well-being is really comparable to like the foundations of a house, and we were saying if we don't invest in it properly, then the cracks are going to start to show as soon as the kind of stormy weather hits. And this was just talking to staff about the impact it can have on our ability to learn as well. If we're not in a good place and we can't learn properly because we don't have the right resources, the inner strength, the self-esteem or mindset to focus on, you know, what we're trying to learn and process information. So we were talking again about that impact on our ability to perform at our best and reach our potential. Whereas if we do manage to invest properly, our young people and all of us really have a much better chance of attainment and achievement, and just so many other aspects of life, working through challenges and building relationships and so on. So we spoke a bit about, you know, how we are all varying on different levels with our mental health, and we can be in any number of places with that. So I've just put that up for people to realise about the continuum, and it's sort of also saying to staff that gone are the days really when, you know, if a young person is struggling with their mental health, that it just kind of gets chucked to guidance, because we're now facing times where we all really have to be aware of the young people in our classes that are struggling, and that's not always obvious, you know, on the surface, that there's quite often a lot more going on below that. So we were talking about children in class who might be going through difficulty with their mental health, and also self-regulation, behaviour, sensory issues, and just how they might present at home or in the classroom, but actually that there could be so much more going on below that surface, and that's just a wee kind of representation of that. So we were then thinking about talking to you about, so why are we actually investing in this role of senior development officer in mental health developments? And this is really, I had gone to SLT about I think it was 3 years ago, in 2019, feeling at that point that we were, you know, sort of nearing crisis point with the amount of people coming to us with, you know, varying levels of difficulties with their emotions and mental health. And that was the school roll at that point there, you can see, of 1,318 then, and we had the number of young people struggling. We took an audit and it was 272. So we were looking at that kind of 1 in 5 figure. And just to say, those numbers were taken in consultation with pupil support leaders and data that we had all collected from our sort of rainbow record of need. And it was like the amount of young people just coming to us and presenting as in some level of difficulty. Again, that doesn't mean to say that they were in severe distress, but they weren't functioning maybe as well as they should be. So I had presented to SLT, who were completely, supportive and wanted to invest in it, but we didn't have any funding to do that at that point, and that didn't happen. So this year, in 2022, in March, we took these figures again, and the school roll in March 22 was 1,519, and the numbers were up to 547. So a marked increase for us post-COVID. So that was the reason that we were very keen to invest. So, I mean, what's come from that is, there's clear evidence that many of our young people are struggling and need more support. We feel that mental health and well-being is mentioned in every tick box everywhere, but our numbers of young people presenting with issues relating to mental health, anxiety, panic, all sorts of different reasons, low mood, depression, self-harm is on the increase. And so are our numbers of students with, on top of that, with additional learning support needs. But funding and services are continuing to be cut, and our school roll continues to rise. So we're also finding that professional agencies and services and partner agencies, they're completely overwhelmed, and they're now, tending to refer back to schools to manage the situation. So that can be really difficult when the time and money and staffing continues to be challenging. So all of this I've been feeling very strongly about for a long time, and had presented that again. So it does all sound a bit doom and gloom there, but we do have to start somewhere, and we want to move forward. And I'm really excited about that and having the opportunity to do that. So we want to start with, developing an integrated whole school approach to mental health and nurture or well-being, and including our, the support for our children and young people, support for our staff, and also for our parents. And so this is the ideal vision that that I was hoping for, and there's a number of elements to it which I'll talk you through. But it was pre-COVID, I started a school improvement team on developing mental health. And the overwhelming factor that all the staff involved felt that we needed a space in school. I mean, we need time, we need money, but we needed a space. We needed to develop somewhere. So the thinking was that we could develop a space and call it a snug in James Gillespie's, and that would aim to be the place that supports all aspects of mental health development, but at whole school level. So providing support, nurture, understanding and growth. And this is an ongoing developing space, hopefully, to support all. So this is really wordy, but I'll briefly go through it, and it's not necessarily a definitive list. It would depend on specific need to our school, but the thinking was that students could be referred to the snug for supports with anxiety, low mood, emotional and mental health difficulties, and that all mental health development work is carried out in the same place under one umbrella. Currently, there's sort of lots of little things happening, and it would be good to get it all under that one structure, and have trained support, trained staff supporting our vulnerable young people. That does requires protected time, which is a bit of a challenge. And counselling, we have trained counsellor provision now in school, but I had managed a free counselling service for over 10 years in school, through liaison with Edinburgh Uni. So there's maybe potential to increase some provision through partner agencies according to the need of our young people. Therapy sessions, music therapy, art therapy, and there's thoughts of having some mindfulness and meditation to support anxiety. We currently have a couple of staff that are interested in that. There's an acronym there, LIAM, which is Let's Introduce Anxiety Management, and that is an NHS run support, which I've done training in, and there's currently some other in-school practitioners for that. There's also Seasons for Growth group work support sessions, and that's for young people who've experienced loss and bereavement or have been significantly impacted by major life changes, which I think we all can agree in the last couple of years we've got many young people that have been significantly impacted in that sense, and that's delivered by trained staff, and I'm currently encouraging a couple of other staff to train in that as well. And also for students, I would love to lead a kind of, give leadership and training opportunities for S5 and 6 students to support mental health work with younger students. There is some potential there. I was thinking they could be like mental health companions and be in corridors, or even develop an on-call system. And there is potential to work towards a recognised award there. So that would be some of the ideas for the students. For staff, we were hoping that this snug would provide a space for drop-ins and for staff to come and talk when needed. We do feel, even pre-COVID with the DARA moves and things, that there was a bit of a loss of that sense of community in school, and we're really keen to build that up again. Yeah, and so really kind of try to get a bit more of that going. And there's also, there's staff training in mental health, and 3 years ago, 2019, I managed to get 20 staff. In fact, it was actually 40 staff, but they could only do 20 at that time, pre-COVID, and they were trained in Scottish mental health first aid. And so there's a push for us to promote them more in school as well. There's currently mental health champions training, which is run by Place to Be charity, who I've been liaising with, and we've got 26 staff signed up for that currently. And I've just completed mental health matters training, which is a really brilliant programme, quite an intensive bit of training, and I've completed that, which means I'm now qualified to deliver that to all staff, and there's lots of interest there. There's professional development opportunities coming up through the school improvement team, which we actually met today, and there's 20 staff signed up for that, which is amazing. And career-long professional learning through delivery of observation and reflection in classroom practice, which is something I could also deliver to support our staff, and that then makes them feel more confident about supporting young people who might be struggling, and in general a development of whole school nurture approach over time. And for parents, we have the Raising Teens with Confidence course. I've delivered that before with a colleague, and the parents that we know there was an overwhelming desire for them to do that training. It is brilliant, and I'd be really happy to pick that up again for our parents as well, and deliver that in the snug. I'd like to invite parents to join me and form a mental health working group. I'm really keen for that, and to get parents on board with us to help us with fundraising as a whole school community and support our mental health and also our new wellbeing hub initiatives. There's the possibility maybe for parents to donate unwanted items to furnish the snug. Like we've been asking young people what they would quite like to us to invest in an area, for people that might be struggling with mental health. We've definitely had a few interesting suggestions, I have to say, this week. They have ranged from chocolate fountains to unlimited access before and after school without teachers present. And my personal favourite yesterday was that they would like llamas into school. So you've got to, you know, I'm not sure they've quite grasped what we're aiming for here, but you've got to admire their kind of, you know, their ambition and creativity. So we'll see. But yeah, that would, you know, there is the possibility we would love people to come on board and donate things to make that a nice space, sensory equipment, books, games and things like that. So there's potential for us to work together much more with parents and benefit maybe from some real skilled parental support out there with mental health development. And we do, I just want to stress that we really do want to get you involved. So these are my priorities really for the role. I don't want to, yeah, I mean, you can maybe see that more or less, but it basically is line managing the Wellbeing Hub CL, the school counsellors and staff, delivering the SQA Mental Health Award, working with our parents, leading the school improvement team, and getting, as I said, all the mental health provisions under one umbrella, getting a safe space in school and delivering quality and focused training for staff to help them with practice. That sounds really easy and straightforward. So what is needed to support this, and I had said this years ago and now, is staff and parents, time and money. So we'll have a look at what we've got. We've got this new you know, Senior Development Officer role, the new Wellbeing Hub provision. We do have staff, as I've explained, an in-school counsellor, partner agencies and parents. Time, please don't laugh, we've got 1 year to do this, but I'm hoping that this would increase and with the position. And money, I do say this slightly in jest because there is money being spent on this to, you know, to pay for me in this position, but there isn't a budget for this. So this is where we're really looking for creative solutions and people to come on board and support us. So what you can do is to help us with raising the profile of the post. Lots of people today in the meeting were talking about us trying to maybe get a little bit more publicity and get more people involved. So to help us just promote where we are with whole school mental development, mental health development at James Gillespie's, and join a parent working group to work alongside me to access and increase much needed quality supports and provisions. Help us to create this snug space in school for all, maybe donate items, and support us with fundraising initiatives to maximise the effectiveness of it and to develop a sustainable model over time. Now this is very wordy and I'm not even going to go through any of it. I've only put this on as a reference in case people maybe wanted to know a bit more about any background training I've done. I did start as a music teacher and went into guidance, but there's just some information to show that I am very passionate about mental health and well-being and very committed, and I have done extensive amounts of training throughout my career. Yeah, so I'll just leave that there just in case people want to have a look at any point, and if you don't, I absolutely won't be offended. And yeah, it was just to say really we need to invest much more in the mental health of our young people, and all or any amount of help and support will be warmly welcomed. And if you would like to join a mental health working group with me, then please just drop me an email at my address, and thank you very much for listening. And I think that's it.
Thank you very much for that, Nikki. That was really very interesting, a very quick run through of what you're doing, but with lots of fascinating detail. Just to reassure parents with regards to the presentation you just made there, that we we will get that from Nikki and we will post it on the Parent Council website so that you can look at it in more detail later on. I know through the Parent Council, been at regular meetings over the last year or two with other parent councils, and that the issue of mental health amongst everybody in the school communities is really, really an important one, and one which is causing problems all over the place. So it's really heartening to see steps being taken at Gillespie's to put somebody in a post which is just looking at this particular very important issue. We've got a couple of questions on the Q&A, so if I can go through those with you, Nikki, if that would be okay.
Of course.
Right, so the first one would actually be basically the question I would have asked if this hadn't been raised otherwise. What help and support do you need from the Parent Council and parent volunteers to take your strategic priorities forward for JGHS? What funds do you need? What programmes or help can be brought in to support pupils and staff? And how can we coordinate better with the school as parents? What coaching, mentoring help can be provided through charities and volunteering? So obviously you've covered quite a lot of that in your presentation, but is there anything else you want to ask? And could you just let us know about the timescales for maybe setting up the working group with parents and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, the timescale's a good one because I've actually not started the post yet. So I start on the 6th of June. And I mean, I'd love to get a meeting together with people. I guess I need to get some idea of how many people would be interested in joining, and then I would coordinate something with people. I'd love to meet really sometime in June. I don't know if that's too soon for people, but it would be great to have even an initial meeting to talk about where we are and where we're going with that. The post it's a year secondment, and I know it's absolutely not long enough, but we have to go with what we have right now and hope that more funding comes our way for that. But I'm very much dedicated to doing what we can in the time we've got, and we'll see where it goes from there. So I guess if people could, there were lots of questions. Do you have and funding specifically, but I think it would be really good if we could get our heads together. If you could email me people who are really interested, and I could try and coordinate, and then we could get a timeline from there maybe.
Thanks, Nikki. That sounds good, and it's good to have something to focus on, starting quite soon. So we'll see what we can do at the Parent Council to support you in doing that and advertising that to parents. Another question was, I have a great deal of sympathy for the workload teachers are under, but as well as introducing new approaches and support for mental health, the existing structures need reassessed, I believe. We have been engaged with pupil support for many months, but get little feedback and very little sense that our discussions are being fed to the teachers. Again, I appreciate the workload and demand sound very high. Now, that's maybe not specifically an issue for you, Nikki, and maybe it's something that Donna would like to comment on, but obviously this is a new post which presumably will have to interact with pupil support and the structure that's already in place. Does anybody want to comment on that particular issue?
I'm quite happy to comment on that, Sarah. Yeah, just respond. Just thanks to Nikki for our presentation and summarising the journey that we've been on and the rationale for creating this post, which parents have been asking about for some time. Specifically here, and this linked to the previous question, the support systems we have in school are really support systems that belong to a different age. Guidance formally came into schools in the 1970s, was when it first trialled and came in, is my recollection of it. And the current version of that, whilst we have, gosh, 5 or 6 full-time pupil support leaders at James Gillespie's, it isn't enough. We've seen numbers double in the last 2 years. So the role that Nikki is taking on here and seeking to develop further is one that will augment that and coordinate the services, our linkages and our partnership working beyond the school. It is fair to say that there are times when they're overwhelmed because the pupil support leaders, they teach least 50% of the time as well, and with caseloads of up to 300 students. At times, I fully understand why we're not able to get back to parents. So bear with us. We do our best to get back to people, but I do appreciate on occasion we may not be able to get back to everyone as quickly as we would like to do that. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much for that, Donald. Did you want to add anything to that, Nikki, at all?
I don't think so. I just that I'm very genuine about asking parents to come on board and work with me. That would be brilliant. And thanks for having me along. It's the first time I've been along at a parent council meeting, so thank you for listening to me.
There's actually one further sort of comment on the Q&As we might as well cover before we let you get away. And thank you very much for coming. We're delighted to have you. This comment is, it is clear that mental health is suffering across the board due to world events such as well as the pandemic. It seems that children are being overwhelmed with bad news and depressing course content in school needs careful consideration. Graphic and upsetting images in combination with heavy subject matter can only be adding to children's mental load. Life can be upsetting, but it's still important to remember that these are still children. We should edit with care and compassion for their better well-being. And I suppose that really kind of sums up the kind of difficult position the school is obviously trying to prepare people for the outside world, but also to nurture and look after the health and well-being of children. Would either of you, Nikki or Donald, like to comment on that before we finish up on the mental health part of the evening?
I mean, I know that I can say that I think we do give that quite a lot of consideration, but I can only really speak from my people support leader capacity. We have dealt with quite a lot of post-COVID information and tried to send out supports with mental health and well-being for young people, but I do appreciate that there may be topics that are sometimes difficult in a number of subjects, but I do think we do try very hard to take that into consideration. So I guess if there's specific things and specific topics that cause distress, then that is the sort of thing that I'm sure a people support leader would try to help with. If you got in touch with us about that, we would be looking into it, or at least feeding back to the relevant faculty that's maybe causing a little bit of distress.
Thanks for that, Nikki. That's very helpful. So can I just say thank you very much for coming for your presentation. I think it is great to hear about the post that you're taking on. It sounds like an enormous job. It's a pity it's only for a year, but we will try very hard to support you in your work and then see whether it might be possible to develop it from there on. And I'll let you get away for the evening. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. So having dealt with that, we can now move on to Donald and the head teacher's report. Can I pass to you there, Donald?
Thanks, Sarah. And yeah, just if I may just go back to the previous question there, I really liked that question, the way it was framed, and it resonates with me, particularly talking about the graphic and upsetting images in combination with heavy subject matter can only be adding to children's mental load. I agree entirely, and as a parent, head teacher, we seek to find the balance between exposure to the reality of life and protecting our children. And that's a dynamic. It varies from one child to another, and it's incredibly difficult to do that. More recently, having seen, I think, the uplift in spirits post-COVID, or at least at the stage that we are at in COVID, only for that to be blighted one morning when I was speaking to this youngster walking up the stairs. Said, "How are you this morning? How are you? How are you feeling about returning and restrictions being lifted?" He says, "Fine, but I didn't sleep last night." And I said, "Oh, really?" Just hoping that it wasn't anything too personal that we might chat about in private. He said, "Well, I'm really worried about the war in Ukraine." I think it highlights that again in the questionnaires wording, it talked about the graphic and upsetting images. there is this 24/7 exposure to all of these things, and trying to protect our young people is challenging. And I'll come back to talking about social media and how we might better harness, protect, and educate our young people. It's all linked, and there's responsibilities we have there as elders in our communities in terms of how we raise our children. Turning to my own report, then there's a few things that I'll go through, and this is a combination of items that I may well sometimes cover in my Friday update, but also in response to a few questions that have been submitted to Parent Council and relayed to me in the last week or so. So I haven't structured them or sequenced them particularly well, so bear with me as I go through them. First of all, in terms of COVID, COVID doesn't quite have the impact on us as a school that it did previously. It's still there, and we're still mindful that there are students and staff who are feeling vulnerable and anxious. So we've got to look after them, as you will do in any community. You look after your more vulnerable. The position with face coverings is that they are encouraged and they're made available at the reception to the school. But beyond that, it is left very much up to the young people. It's my observation that around half of the students wear face coverings as they're walking around the school. There is no requirement to wear face coverings at all. In some of the classrooms, if they're sitting beside another student who is known to be vulnerable, our students have been brilliant in terms of responding and choosing to wear a face covering in that setting. And similarly, where we've had staff who have had underlying health conditions, they share with students that they are vulnerable, will keep their distance, and in response to that, students will wear a face covering. So we're very much coming out of the COVID restrictions. I would say it's working well, but we remain vigilant. We have windows, we keep them open. Ventilation is key as a mitigation. We wipe down desk surfaces between classes. We do that several times a day throughout the day, and that will continue until I hear otherwise from the council who guides us. We have an excellent health and safety department whose job is to advise us and help us. Of course, in the Gillespie's context, each school is different and how we go about it. But touch wood, I can share with you that through the COVID, I was reporting weekly on our figures. When I compared our figures with other schools, proportionately, we had fewer positive cases amongst our student population than other schools did. And I think that was a variety of reasons, and it's quite complex. But I think having well-ventilated classrooms and a student body that very much contributed to the sense of order and calm and just working along. Nobody I know of really enjoyed wearing a face covering, but they did it to try and minimize infections and keep the school running as smoothly as possible. So thank you to all our students who are listening in this evening and to parents who supported us. I appreciate it. They were challenging times, but we're getting through it. And whatever happens in the autumn and a further wave, we will deal with that when it comes. I'm pleased to report that SQA exams, I'll give Colin their proper name this year. SQA exams are running smoothly. Speaking earlier with Bob Shanklin, who was our coordinator, and we're now at roughly the halfway stage through that programme. This is a really busy time of year for me in terms of recruitment. One of my most important roles as a head teacher is the recruitment of staff. It's really important that we get the right people into the school to maintain the standards that we have. So I tend to get involved in every permanent appointment. And I can share with you that between January of this year and the end of June, I anticipate we will have 30 to 35 new staff. Now, some of those staff are support staff. Broadly, our staff fall into two categories. I call them support staff, I call them teaching staff. And it's my intention to share with you an update of those staff we've recruited since January. I intend to do that in the next week. So we've had staff leaving, going on to pastures new, into promoted posts, people going out on maternity leave, etc. So I've been remiss in not keeping you as updated in that line as I would have liked. There's been a few changes there, but I'm pleased to say that when we advertised for a position at Gillespie, we got a very, very healthy number of applicants. The highest of those recently was for a PE teacher position, where we had 63 applicants. Art, we had 42 applicants, and so on. So there's a lot of work, as you can imagine, in screening all these forms, selecting people for interview, and then selecting what we feel is the best candidate for James Gillespie's High School. So I fully expect us to be fully staffed when we resume in August. That's my absolute priority, to make sure that we have the staff in place, because nobody wants to be not having a teacher in front of them come August. So we're well on track towards achieving that. Getting in no particular order, active schools. Thank you to Elliot, who presented at the last Parent Council meeting in terms of what we're offering there, and the extracurricular programme that we have continues to be very well supported. There has been a slight shortfall in the number of contributions that came in, so I would like just to remind parents, chivvy you along a bit. It is by donation. You recall that change came in just in the past year. So if you have forgotten to contribute, or otherwise, please contribute to the Active Schools programme through Parent Pay, just to ensure that we have sufficient income to cover the outlays for coaches and so on and so forth. We'll send out a further reminder to that soon. In an email 2 weeks ago, I made mention of inappropriate use of IT by some of our young people. Primarily, what we've seen is a spike of inappropriate use amongst S1 and S2. That tends to be the year groups where this is likely to happen. As they come into high school, they're finding their feet, and they are learning about new technology. Mix that or combine that with peer relationships and all the other challenges around adolescence, and not to mention the challenges around COVID and so on and so forth. I think they've all contributed to seeing an increase there. So the point of my putting in the email was to alert yourselves to have discussions with young people about what was appropriate and what's inappropriate. As a rule of thumb, ask them if you were standing over their shoulder, would they be happy to send the message or the image that they're about to send? And if the answer is no, then they shouldn't send it. I appreciate it's not as simple as that, because they're becoming independent as young people, and part of that is making mistakes and separating the influence from them that you have as parents. What we're going to do as a school then is we're going to share some appropriate information, some help sheets to you to help guide you through that process in terms of supporting young people. I speak as a parent of 2 teenage daughters, and I quickly discovered that they were very, very skilled in IT. They didn't want me looking at what they were doing at all, and therein lies one of the tensions. And I would suggest that the average teenager is as IT savvy as some of our most skilled teachers in school. They are very IT savvy, but what we have a role to do is to educate them and so on and so forth. We will be offering additional training to staff in school, but what we will also be doing very soon is offering an opportunity for S1 parents. We'll begin with S1 parents it will either be online or face-to-face meetings with a specially trained police officer. Please don't be alarmed. We work very closely with the police, and the police that we work with are very much into being proactive and preventative work. We're not, and I emphasize, we're not into criminalizing young people's behavior at all. It's about education and supporting them make better choices. So we'll have an expert, Sergeant Nathan Reedy, who's going to be working closely with us to tailor a program that will be suited to the appropriate audience at Gillespie. So information will be coming out on that soon, as well as support materials for the wider parent body. In a previous meeting, parents were asking me about the health and well-being census that gained a fair amount of media coverage for a whole variety of of reasons, sometimes quite alarmist headlines. And parents had asked to ensure that they were consulted before children were asked to complete the census. And my colleague Ian Porter has been communicating with parents on that. So there is the option for parents who don't wish their child to take part in that census, that they don't need to take part. And the fear, if I recall rightly, was that youngsters could be identified by the responses they gave. And some parents felt that that was inappropriate, an inappropriate type of census in terms of anonymity. And of course, we entirely respect parents' views on that. A question came in about transitions, and in particular around the current P7 transition this year. And to put that in a little bit of context, it has been our practice now for a number of years at Gillespie's to run 4 transition days for the P7s. Traditionally, it is the second last week of term, usually around the middle of June, and we would begin that week on the Monday with really a sports festival, which we tend to have at Meggetland, and our active schools coordinator, aided by other sports coaches from around the city, come and join, and we have all of our prospective S1s, the outgoing P7s, they come to Meggetland. That program is going to go ahead this year, so that day is going to go ahead, and my colleague Ian Porter, working with Elliot, will be in contact with those parents via the primary school. So we contact the parents via the primary schools. We don't at this stage have email addresses for the P7s. We don't gain that information until the summer, I believe, when records are transferred. So the sports day does go ahead. We've come in for some criticism that we're not offering the full 3 other days, the full 3-day visit. And the reason we're not able to do that is we simply don't have the physical capacity on the campus. We won't take ownership of the Darragh campus, that is our annex, which will give us an additional 300 to 350 spaces, depending on how we designate the rooms. We won't have access to Darragh until mid-July at the earliest. So it's a little bit late, and that's a matter of regret, but we are where we are. So we're not able to have the full P7 transition over 3 days. What we are doing is we're offering a slightly abridged version where the youngsters will come up for a day, generally in their primary school groupings. And depending on the grouping sizes, we may group together 1 or 2 primary schools. So it's not the same as other schools are experiencing this year, but it is, I think, a compromise in our circumstances. I thought it was important that we managed to get the pupils up for at least 2 days, so they're mixing with peers. I would emphasize that the enhanced transition, each year we identify a group of youngsters who are particularly anxious about the move to high school. And through working with the primary schools, particularly the P7 teachers, we identify those youngsters, and they have a program of visits to the high school over a period of around 6 weeks, where they visit and there's a chance to familiarise themselves and I hope reduce their quite significant anxiety over the summer. Moving on from or allied to that, a P7 open night. There will be a P7 open night, and currently we're grappling with how best to do that, to do it face-to-face or whether to do it online. If we do it face-to-face, we would have to do it over more than 1 night because of the sheer numbers. If we do it online, we can do it all in 1 night. And I'm aware that there are pros and cons of each, and I defer to Ian Porter, one of our deputies who's in charge of transition, to have a look at the various pros and cons of that. And related to parents visiting the school, there was a further question around when parents would get a chance to visit the high school. And as Sarah mentioned earlier, the survey that was carried out with parents was 50-50 split, so that's not really helpful at all. I would love it if it was 80-20. Having said that, I have had opportunity to reflect on the survey results. It's roughly 50-50 with online and people seeking a face-to-face visit. So my thinking currently is as follows. I think there is advantage to having parents, particularly of S1, S2, who have never visited the high school, that we should prioritise them coming to the high school, and their meetings should be face-to-face. I think also where we're having meetings, traditional parents meetings at the high school, we should potentially reserve the right to make them online during the winter months when snow and frost may present barriers for parents arriving. That's a decision that could be taken 2 or 3 weeks in advance of a parents' meeting, where we could foresee that the weather was going to be inclement and it was going to be difficult for people to physically come to the building. But beyond that, I don't have firm views one or t'other. I'm moving very much, or edging very much towards ensuring that our S1, S2 parents have the opportunity to meet parents face to face. So you have the opportunity to visit the building and meet staff face to face. We would intend to finalise our calendar and arrangements by the end of June. So that work is ongoing. So if there are any further views or thoughts of how best to do that, or if you're aware of practice in another school that maybe has got a better solution to this, I'd be really, really keen to hear about that. Moving on to a different topic, and that's DARA. I just mentioned that a moment ago. DARA as an extension to our school will give us an additional capacity of 300 to 350, and I mentioned there are two numbers there. It depends on how we use the rooms in DARA. If we use some of the rooms for practical groups, then there's a maximum of 20. If they're for non-practical, we could have 30 or 32 in the room. So DARA will be available for us from the middle of July. It does mean that staff and pupils haven't had the opportunity to familiarise themselves with DARA. I do foresee, and we have asked the authority for additional days to allow staff, first of all, to become familiar with the building. We have to, as a matter of health and safety, be familiar with the building, the fire escape routes, the assembly points before we have students in. So just to give you the heads up, we are looking to have an additional 1 or 2 days in August, additional closure days where students wouldn't attend school, to allow staff to familiarise them with the building, and also potentially to have our students being phased back to school post-summer. Now we've put a request into the council to allow us to do that, so we can better manage the opening of DARA, and that will impact on families. We'd also asked for an additional day to allow us to pack and to get resources, etc., organised on the last day of term. As soon as I hear a confirmation of those possible additional days, I will let parents know. Question come in around excursions, about why excursions weren't happening. Just to reassure you that excursions are happening. I know that I'm the excursions coordinator. I take that role on not because I'm the head teacher, but because it was just one of the roles I took on in my early days, and I've kept going with it. We have excursions, the Duke of Edinburgh excursions. They started some weeks ago, and the other excursions, the various day trips in and around the Lothians and also to Glasgow quite soon. They are happening, and the planning around those is very much in progress. Looking to next session, the parents who have been with us for 2 or more years, I'm thinking to the pre-COVID days, you'll recall that we would issue an excursions booklet. We deliberately made a point of issuing that excursions booklet on the beginning of September. We'll aim for the 1st of September this year, and in that booklet we will include all the excursions that we are planning for the coming session. The reason we do that is to allow you as families to plan pupils' involvements in the excursions. It will illustrate the costs, it will show the dates as well of the various excursions. Some of the excursions, and take for example the languages excursions, they can be quite expensive. They can be anywhere between £500 and £800. And I'm very aware that with talk about fuel poverty and rising cost of living as we go into the autumn, that school trips maybe present enormous difficulty for families. I still think that I wanted to put these out to gauge levels of interest in them. We will, as a school, working with Parent Council and the Trust, look at ways of raising money to ensure that, and really the ambition and the aspiration has to be that any school trips that we run must be open to all. And emphasise that quite deliberately. All trips are open to all. So if there are families that cannot afford them, please alert the head teacher to that so we can go in and support I do have access to additional funds to allow us to support youngsters who can't afford it. This is done confidentially and sensitively, again, the principle of inclusion and access to all is one that's very, very important. We also, on occasion, and thanks to the parents who do this, when they're paying for trips, there's the opportunity to put an additional contribution in there, which allows other youngsters who may not have had the financial means to be part of that trip. Well, that's been a feature through the years that I've been at Gillespie's, and one that's been very, very gratefully received, so that we can have all youngsters accessing the various trips. So that booklet will come out around the beginning of September, and we ensure that all the expensive trips that we propose to run are there. I'm looking to see the notes that Sarah gave me earlier in terms of items, questions that had come in. I'm hoping that I've covered them all, no doubt. If I haven't, well, there is one that that came in some weeks ago, and it was in regard to pupil names and the mispronunciation of pupil names. And I thank you to the parent who alerted us to that. I was a bit concerned to hear that some of our staff were, well, mispronouncing a name is something that happens, and I freely admit that I do that. One thing that you do learn as a teacher as you develop your craft is that you'll ask the youngster how their name should be pronounced, and as teachers we'll note down in a register a phonetic pronunciation of that, so you're less inclined then to mispronounce. But it does happen. Similarly, pupils will mispronounce teachers' names. It's something we spoke about at a recent in-service with staff. So what we agreed that we would do is that we would share best practice around that in faculties, so that youngsters who were made to feel uncomfortable in any way around that particular aspect, and that we seek to minimise the chances of that happening. And that we will do, and indeed it'll be something that is on our agenda for staff training again in August, as the school has become increasingly diverse, so too as the number of students and staff who come to us from different countries. So we just got to get better at prioritising and getting that right. And I have no doubt that Sarah, perhaps in the Q&A questions, if there's anything else that I've missed, I would. Yeah, there's a few other things I'll want to mention, just thanking the parent council, etc. But I'll do that at the end. So at this point, Sarah, I just wonder if we might pick up some of the questions that are appearing in the Q&A, or anything that has come into you that I have inadvertently omitted to mention.
No, thank you very much for that very full report, Donald. That covered an awful lot of ground and issues generally which have been raised by parents with the Parent Council, including things like excursions. Can I just quickly run through the questions, some of which you kind of partly covered already in your report. One of the earliest ones was, will the incoming S1 parents be invited to the school at any time? I understand other high schools are offering a more extensive induction programme, including parents, and more than a one-day visit for students. Obviously, you've covered the restrictions on the P7 to S1 transition because of space. Is there any plans to have the S1 parents into school before the start of term, or at the start of term?
Yes, we want to prioritise the S1 and S2 parents. So when it comes to parents' evenings, would want those meetings to be face-to-face. The S1, for example, the intake this year will be 320. So when the potential is there that both parents and the child would attend, we'd be looking at a potential audience of not far short of 1,000. Our theatre, which is our largest indoor space, has a capacity of around 280. So it presents logistical challenges for us in terms of numbers, but it's one that we're considering and looking at. In all likelihood, we would have to have parents will be coming in groups. What we've done previously on that, because this challenge of having large parent group is not new to us, we arranged evenings based on the primary school that youngsters are coming from. So something that we're mindful of, Sarah, and something that we're keen to address, and we recognise the need and the importance of having the face-to-face opportunities.
Thank you, Donald. On to another couple of comments which came at the end of the mental health presentation, but after Nikki left. One saying pupils' mental health will also be boosted if activities such as the alternative timetable, residential trips, etc., which were cancelled in the pandemic, could be restored and made as widely available as possible. So I think, unless you've got further comments on that, you've covered the restarting of trips, and I think that it is beyond really debate that this is a really important part of school life and pupils' experience, and that it will be of great benefit to everybody for those to get up and running again. And another comment, I'll just put those together. Please don't cut children off from the world because it's felt to be too harsh. They need to learn to live in it, which I guess is another reflection on the sort of difficulty in balancing the two aspects of school life, in the sense of preparing children for the outside world, which can be hard, but also supporting their mental health while at school. Though, I mean, obviously, even in the outside world, the workplaces and whatever also have a duty to look after the mental health of their staff. Is there anything you'd like to say on either of those points?
Just it cut out for me just a little bit there. I picked up the question about the people's mental health. I'll come to that one first, Sarah. I do think that re-establishing routines through the classroom routines and also the extracurricular. And one thing I do find is that curricular and extracurricular, they tend to merge into each other. I see them all really as curricular experiences adding to the education of our children. I think one thing that clearly was missed through COVID was the opportunities for interactions with peers, and classroom experiences offer that, but so also the extracurricular. So I very much take on board that these are important. The ski trip, for example, the next ski trip I was discussing this today with Mr. Dygans, who runs the trip. We may run a smaller ski trip, which will please some and displease many, in January this coming year. Normally the lead time and the planning time for that is around a year. So it may be that we take a smaller group if we're able to do that. But the next large ski trip of between 60 and 80 students would be 2024. The alternative timetable, I don't wish to come across as being defensive or making excuses. The planning for that would normally start around October the previous year. We're running an alternative timetable, which is up to 3 days for around 700 students. It takes military planning and takes enormous planning. With all the uncertainty of when we were coming back and how we would come back this year, basically time ran away for us. So we weren't able to do that. And for the parents who are new to this, the alternative timetable was the alternative timetable we would run for S1, 2 and 3 during the month of May, when the seniors are out on exam leave. And given all the uncertainty around that and wishing to really kind of put our energies into making sure that SQA examinations ran as smoothly as possible this year, we ran out of time, so therefore alternative timetable didn't run. However, we'd hope that that would run next year, and that would be our plan. And I think the importance of these things are important. Was there a second question to that, Sarah, also that you wanted me to mention?
It was the comment which came after that on the Q&A, which is about not cutting children off from the world because it's felt to be too harsh, because they need to learn to live in it.
Yes, and I appreciate that's very difficult. As difficult as a parent, difficult as a teacher, as a head teacher. When you're working with individual children, it's easier to gauge what you might expose them to because they're all different. As soon as you've got a room with 2 or more children, you've got a very mixed ability classroom. It's as simple as that, with different needs, different sensitivities, different thresholds. But it is something that we're sensitive to and alert to, and I very much take that point on board, that if we become too protective, we then aren't developing and building up the resilience that we might otherwise be building up for whatever the next difficulty or challenge might be coming our way. So we're learning, we're developing, we're evolving, and how best to respond to that. So I think it's a dialogue that we need to keep open as teachers and as parents about how best we support, but yet a degree of protection for our young people as well.
Thanks, Donald. The next question, as it says, is quite specific, but it's asked about S3 chemistry notes, and the parent says there's a contrast with physics and that there are scant study notes, and the parent in question knows one ex-chemistry teacher from JGHS who's appalled at the material my son has been directed to for Nat 5. I suspect you can't comment in detail about chemistry notes for Nat 5. Perhaps this is something you could take back to the science faculty and let them know about this comment. But if you want to comment on it, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I will do. And just as I wouldn't comment on a specific member of staff, and that isn't, to be fair, commenting about a particular member of staff, but comments, and I'll call it feedback of that nature. If there's some aspect of our service that any parent is unhappy about, please send it directly to me. I will guarantee two things. One, I'll guarantee I'll acknowledge it, and B, I'll guarantee that we'll follow it up. It's really, really important that we know that. Otherwise, there's a danger we become complacent and standards will drop. So I will pick that up and share it with our curriculum leaders for science to check that. And I did give a kind of a wry smile when I saw the ex-chemistry teacher from JGHS. Please contact me. He can speak to me in conference if there's something that's missing. We're not beyond criticism, and if there was something that he or she sees that we can do better, I will be delighted in all, and I say that with honesty, to receive comments and thoughts so we can feed that into the department. I'm one who's soon to join the ranks of ex-teacher, and I will be critical of my colleagues when I see standards dropping as well, and fire them at me. Let's not accept any kind of mediocrity or dropping in standards. Thank you.
Thanks. There's a couple of questions from the same parent, which are, they say, slightly interconnected. One is about what the school is planning in terms of homework for S1s and S2s going forward, and that their child who's finishing S1 has found it difficult to know what support to offer for all the new subjects. And the second question is about parents' evenings and whether it be possible to extend the time available to discuss learning with relevant teachers. That a maximum of 10 minutes per year is too little. Now, I know these are issues that have come up at lots of parent council meetings in the past, and it's also an issue which was part of, to a certain extent, the recent survey on parents' evenings which we ran, but I wonder whether you'd like to say a comment for those parents who haven't been involved in previous parent council meetings discussing these subjects.
Yes, sure. As Sarah just mentioned, these questions have arisen before, and one of my frustrations is I've not been able to implement the solution that I would like to implement. As a school, we've been able to connect with schools in different parts of this country, but also other countries, and we've seen some really, really good practices. One of the things that I was impressed with when I visited a school in London, but also one in Hong Kong, was the way that parents could interact with school systems online. Online information, you were able to access information on your child in much the same way as you would access, for example, your bank balance. I suspect that if you're like me, that visits to the bank are very, very rare and probably unnecessary when you can use an app. One thing I'm very, very keen to do, and we've been working at developing, and for a variety of reasons we've not been able to implement, and it's something that we'd be really keen to do, is there are two apps that we've been working on. One is called Show My Homework, an app that's used widely across the UK, which would allow you as a parent to log in and have a look at what homework has been issued to your child each period that they're in school. The reliance on, we find ourselves in this interim position where we know that iPads are coming in, they're going to be issued to all pupils this autumn. We, in anticipation of that, have reduced the issuing of homework diaries to our pupils because we saw it as unnecessary. We're going to use an online mechanism. So we find ourselves in that position. In the interim, what I would like to do, we will reissue our homework guidelines for all families, which may or may not have been relevant during the COVID years. That was an unusual time. Yeah, I'd want to do that, and certainly in the coming months would want to revisit and find out whether or not our current approaches to homework are appropriate, or whether they need to evolve in line with a different group of parents coming through with perhaps different expectations when we last surveyed on that several years ago. In terms of an overview provided at the start of the year, I'm not quite sure what that means, but there was no overview provided at the start of the year that parents could use to help them guide through this. Sarah, I'm not quite sure what that part means. Can you help me interpret that?
Well, the text of the question is, my child is finishing S1. I found it very difficult to know what support to offer for all of the new subjects.
Okay.
And lots of the materials are online, but there was no overview provided at the start of the year that parents could use to help guide them through this. Is this something that could be provided for future years?
I probably need, if that particular parent would contact me with suggestions as to what particular support could be offered. I suppose one of the changes when you move from primary school to high school is the difference in engagement and the opportunities for engagement with high school teachers. It's a different environment, and it doesn't work in quite the same way. So I'd be really keen to develop that. We know that parental engagement has a huge impact on youngsters' eventual achievement. So how best and how we would develop that, I would be keen to hear from parents on that. One of my deputy head colleagues will be leading on that very area in the coming months. So it's something that's going to be active and live in our school improvement plan as to how we best do that. And I'd be keen to tap into ideas and views from parents who have got thoughts and suggestions for us. There is the Show My Homework app, which we intend to launch in the autumn. That would cover the homework side, so parents are more easily able to identify and find out what homework has been issued to pupils with deadlines and so on and so forth. And it's just a feature of moving to high school that pupils are less inclined to go to parents for help. It's just part of growing up and adolescence becoming more independent. And it's frustrating for parents because you know they're now presented with up to 16 subjects and they will need your support in supporting them to make better choices and decisions about timekeeping, etc. So, but we as a school, that's an area that we need to clearly improve on and develop. Building on and learn from what we developed and what we developed through the period of COVID when engagement with parents was different. So it's one that it's only one to come back to. I don't have all the answers tonight. I've got ideas about how we do it, but there's obstacles that we need to overcome there in terms of getting the green light from the council in terms of using apps that may be different to other schools. But we can come back and expand on that at a later point, perhaps.
Thanks, Donald. There is also a question here about the new homework app, which I think you've covered that in dealing with the last two questions. It's about just after 8:15. We've got a few more questions, so perhaps we can try and get through them as quickly as possible so that parents who are waiting patiently, hopefully will get answers to these. The next one I think is a simpler question for you to answer. What is the expected school roll for 22-23?
The expected school roll is around 1,640. And just to put that in context, the original school that was completed, the current campus, when it was completed in 2016, was designed and built for a roll of 1,150. 2 years after that, we had 6 additional classrooms placed in the school car park adjacent to the Children First building and just off White House Loan. One of those classrooms we used as a staff base just to serve as the room. So that gave us an additional capacity of 300. And that took our capacity up to 1,450. Over the last year, we have used the first floor in the Children First building. That gave us an additional capacity of 100. The current school roll was around 1540, so the roll is rising by a further 100. And in August this year, I anticipate it will be 1640. So with the Darach coming on stream, we will have sufficient accommodation across the main campus and Darach. But further down the line, I would reckon in 2 years' time, we will be back at a stage where the numbers of pupils in the school will exceed our capacity. So work will have to begin now in terms of developing the next stage and additional accommodation for the school. Current figures would indicate that the school roll will climb to just over 2,000. So the challenge around accommodation continues. There is a challenge, but also I want to finish on a positive that provides opportunities. We're able to bring in new staff and new subjects as a result of that. But I do appreciate that there's a degree of uncertainty and perhaps upheaval for those who are involved in the various arrangements around new buildings, etc. So it's a long-winded answer. So the answer is 1640 is the current best estimate.
Thank you very much for that long-winded answer, Donald. That was very helpful, I think, to see the whole context. And as you say, it's clearly an issue which we're going to have to come back to again after the summer. It's one of the subjects that we are often discussing, even as a parent council with the council. So moving quickly on, a comment from a parent who arrived late at the meeting about the timescale for a new head teacher being appointed. As I said earlier on, the post has been advertised and it's hoped to move to interviews quite quickly. When a head teacher is appointed, it will obviously depend on finding an appropriate candidate and the notice period they have to give for any post they have at the moment. So the aim I think the council has is to get somebody in post as close as possible to when Donald leaves. I don't think that it will be actually exactly at that point, but that kind of timescale. And if there is not an appropriate candidate at this point, then they will look to putting an acting head teacher in post. I'll just move on to the next couple of things and then Donald can comment on that if he has anything else to add. There's a comment about people being pleased that the graduation ceremony at Greyfriars is being reinstated for the S6 and how important this is for the year group given how disrupted their senior years have been. So I'm sure we can all agree to that. And moving on to kind of actual classroom work, we gather that all S3 English classes will be mixed ability as opposed to streamed. Why is this, please? And is this an Edinburgh-wide policy or an approach chosen specifically within Gillespie's? Thank you. Again, that's an issue that's come up at previous parent council meetings as well.
Yeah, happy to respond to that one, Sarah. Yeah, this is nothing new in terms of us running mixed ability classes. Classes have been mixed ability in English and maths for most of the years that I've been at Gillespie's. The reference to streaming, streaming is a method of grouping pupils that ended probably a generation ago, certainly in most Scottish schools. Streaming was a system where, dependent on usually it was your ability in maths and English, you then were the top set for every other subject, including whether it be PE or art. And that was discontinued as a means of grouping young people for learning probably a generation ago. We at Gillespie's, we've used mixed ability setting very successfully in maths and English, but there are one or two exceptions to that. Let me just explain that. When pupils move from S2 into S3 in English, 90% of those youngsters are given the opportunity, and as far as I'm concerned, are expected to aim for National 5. There will be a small number of youngsters for whom National 5 at that stage may not be a realistic aspiration, certainly at the end of S4. So for a number of youngsters, they'll go into smaller groups and there'll be additional support for into that group where maybe National 2 or National 3 or National 4 may be maybe more appropriate to their development at that stage. There would be the opportunity for those youngsters to go on to National 5 levels, perhaps in S5 or S6, because each youngster is different. Similarly in maths. So just to reassure parents that whilst, yes, they are mixed ability, they are all aiming, or the vast majority of the classes are aiming for National 5 when they enter S3 and then going into higher in S5. There are small number of classes, we call them supported classes, where we will put some additional support in for youngsters who, for a variety of reasons, may not be at the stage of being able to get involved and getting stuck into the National 5 course at that point. But the pathways are always such that National 5 will be an aspiration for that youngster later in school or later in life, as life is, our learning will continue well beyond school, and the opportunity to gain qualifications continues well beyond school.
Thank you for that explanation, Donald. There's a couple of questions which are related about the Darach. One of them is what year groups will be using the Darach. Another one was what will the Darach be used for? I was under the impression it would be primarily senior pupils S5, 6.
In relation to Darach, we will have our Gaelic medium education pupils at Darach for some of the week, a proportion of the week. I think currently that stands, they will be spending at least 2 full mornings in Darach, so they're taught exclusively in Gaelic. The rest of the time, the Gaelic medium education pupils will be at the main campus. In addition to Gaelic medium education pupils, then at Darach, we will also have pupils from across the school, and it will depend on just the availability of accommodation particular to them at different stages in the timetable. The timetable is being constructed this year by my colleague Deirdre O'Brien, and it is a fairly complex task, and it's near completion. We hope to have that shared with staff in the next week or so. So at this stage, I don't know off the top of my head who exactly will go into Darach, but it will go across the school. My preference is that it would be for non-Gaelic pupils, that it would be senior pupils who would be travelling, and that's what we would intend to do, so that they tend to be more focused. And there's my experience in the past is that there's less likelihood of them arriving late for classes because they are a bit more purposeful in their studying and not dilly-dallying between buildings and between classrooms.
Thanks, Donald. Now, I think we're nearing the end, so I'll try and be very efficient. There's a question about the ski trip for next year, which I think you've covered. And then there are 2 language questions, one of which is, how many further years is the Swire Group funding for Mandarin teaching going to last? Another one was, we have been unable at both S2 Parents' Evenings this year to speak to our child's German teacher, we gather because there isn't one. Is this true? And if so, will there be a German teacher to teach our child's Nat 5 German class from the start of S3? Thanks.
So first of all, Sarah, in relation to Mandarin, the Swire programme then was a 10-year programme, and we're in year 6. And the Swire programme, essentially the funding was used in order for us, it was to start up and to establish Mandarin in our school. I'm pleased to share that we now have, or we recently appointed a full-time teacher of Mandarin. Mandarin continues to grow as a subject in our school, so that post will be absorbed into our staffing costs this year. The popularity of Mandarin is such that we will actually require to be part of, and we are part of the Swire Centre, which means that we will have some additional Mandarin teaching in our school, in addition to the full-time member of staff who is factored into our own costs as a school. So in summary then, Swire funding for another 4 years, but as the numbers grow in the school, we would seek to be appointing more Mandarin staff. Question on German. Yes, we have German teachers in our school. We have 10 languages teachers in our school, and we aim to recruit staff who teach 2 or more languages. So I'm not quite sure what's happened with that particular class this year, but National 5 German will be taught by a fully qualified German teacher, of whom we have at least 3 in the school.
Thank you so much for running through all of that, Donald. I think we've covered all of the issues which were raised in the Q&A, so I can now pass it back to you, because I think you wanted to say a few further words on the occasion of your last Parent Council meeting, which I imagine must be very emotional for you.
It is. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. it hasn't really sunk in for me yet that I am leaving, because this is always a really busy term in terms of particularly recruitment and preparation for the new timetable, which starts in 2.5 weeks' time. So it still hasn't sunk into me that this is my last term, and I'm hoping I'll have an opportunity at some point to say my farewells and to do my nostalgia and my sentimental bits. It is busy. I was sharing with my wife earlier. I think I've missed one parent council meeting in the last 30 years. Across my previous 4 schools, I've been the parent council rep, either as an assistant head, a deputy head, or a head teacher. I've been a head teacher for the last 18 years across 2 schools. It has been, and I'm not just saying this because I've got a captive audience of parents, but it has been, I think, one of the highlights, and one of the things I really enjoy in my career is working closely with parents. I mentioned earlier that a priority was recruiting the right staff. Well, a priority also is communicating with parents and enabling parents to be part of their child's education. Cool, that is so hard to achieve. It's incredibly hard to achieve. But at Gillespie's, the level of engagement from parents has been fantastic and wonderful. Yeah, that's appreciated in your level of support for your child's learning, but also for me as a head teacher. Prior to coming to Gillespie's, people had shared with me, "Oh, Don, I'm going to have to be careful with the Gillespie's parents. They're this and that," and it was said with somewhat negative aspersions. I have never found it so. I've always found parents at Gillespie's to be phenomenally supportive, and I can say that whenever there's any doubt in my mind as to whether or not I go with what the parents would like me to do, or whether I go with what somebody out with the school community wants me to do, I will always side with the parents. And I say that with pride, with passion, and I hope that my successor will do similarly, because you are heading, and the head teacher has a privilege of leading a school community of which parents are an integral part. I see myself as serving you and your aspirations for young people, and I've done as well as I could, and I'm still learning. There are things I would do differently, particularly going through COVID again. There's things I've learned through that I would want to do differently, but that's life. I do, and I will unashamedly refer to myself as a school's lead learner, and I'm continuing to learn, and I will do right to the end of June, when that would be my last school day. I really want to finish by thanking the Parent Council and the officers this year, who have been extraordinarily good to work with. Sarah mentioned earlier about the challenges through COVID, and it's been like no other 2 years in my 40-year career. We've had to adapt, and sometimes we're changing decisions and ways of doing things at 8 o'clock at night, and having to communicate that with parents the following morning. And I hope not betraying the amount of panic that was going on behind the scenes, trying to appear calm and composed for the sake of the young people, because that's what it's all about. It's all about giving them the best possible start in life, and opportunities to develop as young people and be ready for whatever that next chapter might be. So I'll sign off at that point, Sarah. Thank you, but I hope I have a further opportunity to thank all those who have been so positive and so integral to making the James Gillespie's High School the success that it is.
Thank you, Donald. I, like you, hope there will be another opportunity, which is not just today, to mark your departure from the school, and we'll be able to say more about your time at the school and the loss that you will be to the school community when you go. Speaking for my own part, I have witnessed on lots of occasions times when Donald has really gone a long way to support parents and the school, even in the face of a lot of opposition, and that all that he said there genuinely means, in my experience. We'll be really sorry to see you go, but as I say, I hope there'll be another opportunity to revisit this particular issue. For this evening, I'd like to thank Donald for his very last head teacher's report and for answering all of those questions in the Q&A, and also Nikki for her presentation and questions earlier on. Thank you also to everyone for attending and for your questions tonight, and for those which were raised in advance. Our next meeting will be after the summer at a date yet to be agreed. I will let you have more details about what is planned for that next year. As always, please raise any issues or make suggestions via the Parent Council email address, jghscouncilcomms@gmail.com, and please take a look at our website for further information on our work. That's at jghsparentcouncil.org. We post regularly on different issues that we would like to bring to parents' attention, so please take a look. In terms of contact as well, the parent working group that Nikki Graham wanted to set up, obviously you can contact her, but if you're interested also in coming through the Parent Council, then please get in contact with us about that. So for tonight, I look forward to joining you again next time. I hope you all have a great summer holiday when it comes. Thank you and goodbye.